بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين. Last time we got halfway through the subsection of Tayammum, and today we're going to finish with the Sunan of Tayammum and with the Nawaqid or the nullifiers of Tayammum. طيب. قال المصنف رحمه الله: وسننه تجديد الصعيد ليديه ومسح ما بين الكوعين والمرفقين والترتيب. So the sunnahs of at-tayammum. First of all, last time we mentioned that the first strike on the object is an obligatory action. It is from the arkans, from the pillars of tayammum, that you touch the sand or stone or marble or etc. We mentioned the different categories of a slide last time. Whatever it is mandatory to touch it at least one time, and then to do your hands and your hands to the ku'ayn, to the wrists and the face. And we mentioned that the second one is a recommended action, a sunnah. So it says tajdeel al-sa'id, renewing the sa'id for your hands. So the first, according to the sunnah, the first, just as in wudu, there's an order. The sunnah order for tayammum is the face. So he says tajdeel al-sa'id liyadayhi. So renewing it for your hands, assuming that you're following the sunnah of doing it in the correct order. Hypothetically, if someone were to not follow the sunnah and start with his hands, then the second strike, the second hit, or the second touch on the object, that would be for the face. But he says liyadayhi, assuming that the order is being followed. وَمَسْحُ مَا بَيْنَ الْكُوعَيْنِ وَالْمِرْفَقَيْنِ. So we said up to the ku'ayn, up to the wrists. We said this is the ku'. That is obligatory. As for مَا بَيْنَ الْكُوعَيْنِ وَالْمِرْفَقَيْنِ, so between the wrist and the elbow, that is a sunnah. And the third one is at-tartib, the order, as we mentioned. So the face and then the hands to the wrist and then the hands to the elbows. This is the sunnah order. It is only three parts of the body, so the order is easier to remember than wudu or ghusl. وَفَضَائِلُهُ, so the recommended actions which are of a lesser level than the sunnah. At-tasmiyatu, saying Bismillah before you begin. وَتَقْدِيمُ الْيُمْنَ عَلَى الْيُسْرَى, the right arm before the left arm. وَتَقْدِيمُ ظَاهِرِ الذِّرَاعِ عَلَى بَاطِنِهِ. So we said the ظاهir is the apparent of the arm. The apparent, what you can see when you look at it, and the batin is the underneath of it. The batin is the hidden. So putting the apparent over the hidden, ظاهر over the batin is a recommended action. وَمُقَدِّمِهِ عَلَى مُؤَخِّرِهِ, and the tips of it to the end. So as we said, we do not begin with the elbow to the wrist. We work our way from the top to the bottom, from the tips of the fingers till the elbow. وَنَوَاقِضُهُ. So now the nullifiers of tayammum. He starts off by saying كَالْوُضُوء. So everything that is a nullifier of wudu, and those of you who do not remember them in detail can go back to the lesson about nullifiers of wudu. All the nullifiers of wudu are nullifiers of tayammum. And he does not mention two more. There are two more nullifiers of tayammum. The first one is finding water within the time frame. Meaning, someone who makes tayammum validly because he did not have access to water, and then before the prayer starts, a man comes to him and says, hey, I've come back, I found some water. His tayammum is invalid. As soon as he's found the water, his tayammum is invalid. The second one is if he leaves too much time between him and the prayer. Meaning if I make tayammum for dhuhr, and as we said, tayammum for the resident in the city and in good health does not make tayammum for sunnah prayers or nawafil prayers. Rather, he prays them after the obligatory prayer he made tayammum for. And similarly, he does not pray two obligatory prayers with one tayammum. So someone makes tayammum for dhuhr specifically. And then instead of praying, he gets distracted. He remembers he has to do something. And he ends up praying an hour later. That tayammum is no longer valid. He has to redo tayammum. So these two additional nullifiers of tayammum are important to mention as it is not mentioned in this text. Everything else, kal wudu, the nullifiers of wudu, is what he mentions. This is the main thing to worry about. ولا تصلى فريضتان بتيمم واحد. So no two obligatory prayers are prayed with one tayammum. ومن تيمم لفريضة جاز له النوافل بعدها ومس المصحف والطواف والتلاوة إن نوى ذلك واتصلت بالصلاة ولم يخرج الوقت. So whoever prays an obligatory prayer, it is permissible for him to pray the nawafil, the sunnah prayer, right after it. So he finishes Dhuhr and he has sunnah after it. He doesn't have to do it within 5 seconds. He can, for example, take 2 minutes in between them to say the adhkar after prayer, to say the muawwidat, something like this, to read just a page of Quran and then to pray the nawafil. Similarly, tawaf and tilawa. So we said he can pray the sunnah prayer after, he can also do tilawa after. Now, we already mentioned that tilawa is permissible for someone who does not have wudu. What is not permissible is to touch the mushaf. But tayammum can also be for ghusl. So this would apply to someone who's doing it for the sake of ghusl. Because someone who is in a state of janaba cannot read the Quran, even from his memory. So if he is in a state of janaba and does tayammum, he can also do tilawa now right after the prayer. إنه وذلك واتصلت بالصلاة. So if it's اتصلت بالصلاة, if it's connected to the prayer, meaning the time is connected to the prayer. ولم يخرج الوقت. And so the prayer time has not ended. So if someone prays Dhuhr at the very end of the Dhuhr timing, and then as soon as he's done the obligatory prayer, the Asr adhan goes off. Even though he has just finished his obligatory prayer and he's allowed to do nawafil and tilawa right after it, if the prayer time has ended, then it is no longer permissible. وَلَمْ يَخْرُجِ الْوَقْتِ. This is a condition. He mentions that the time has not ended. وَجَازَ بِتَيَمُّمْ النَّافِلَةِ. وَجَازَ بِتَيَمُّمِ النَّافِلَةِ. So the one who makes tayammum for a nafila, كُلُّ مَا ذُكِرَ إِلَّا الْفَرِيضَةِ. Whoever makes tayammum for a nafila, and we said that the al-hadir al-sahih, the person who is a resident and is in good health, cannot make tayammum for a nafila. So who is this talking to? Other people. For example, the traveler. We mentioned the traveler can do this. If he makes tayammum for a nafila, he can do all of the above. All of the above. كل ما ذكر. So tawaf and tilawa, all these things he's allowed to do with the tayammum of a nafila, except the obligatory prayer. Even if he's a traveler, the tayammum of an obligatory prayer must be independent and for that specific prayer. So we can't make tayammum for Salat al-Duha and then immediately after, or 10 minutes after, pray Salat al-Dhuhr as soon as the adhan comes. ومن صلى العشاء بتيمم قام للشفع والوتر بعدها من غير تأخير ومن تيمم من جنابة فلا بد من نيتها. Whoever prays al-Isha, we already mentioned in general that he can pray the sunnah prayers after an obligatory prayer. Here he's mentioning a specific example, which is al-Shaf' al-Witr after al-Isha. So al-Shaf' al-Witr is a sunnah after al-Isha. He mentions that it can be done right after al-Isha. And the reason he's mentioning this as an example, first of all, to make an example out of the rule that we mentioned. Second of all, to confirm and attest the importance of al-Shaf' al-Witr, which is a sunnah mu'akkada. وَمَنْ تَيَمَّمْ مِنْ جَنَابَةٍ فَلَا بُدَّ مِنْ نِيَتِهَا. Whoever makes tayammum from janaba, rather than just a lack of wudu, he has to have that intention of the tayammum from janaba. So one should not just make tayammum in general without the intention of removing that janaba. طيب. We're not going to start al-hayd today because it requires its own mental space in a way. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about al-mas'h ala al-jabira, wiping over the al-jabira, which is a cast or a just reading the question in the chat. Sheikh, in these classes, are we also going to learn about how to pray Salah in accordance to the Maliki Fiqh? Yes. So we have al-hayd, menstrual bleeding, and nifas, postpartum bleeding, and then prayer timings, and then conditions of the prayer. I'm going to get deep into the ahkam of Salah. So just 2-3 days, and we're going to be talking about ahkam Salah, inshallah. Now, al-masah ala al-jabira. Al-masah ala al-jabira is going to be mentioned now because it is similar in ruling to the tayammum. The concept of it is similar. And also it's not mentioned in Al-Akhdari specifically. It is mentioned in other texts we're going to cover, but Al-Akhdari, rahimahullah, chose to summarize, and he had to make a decision about what topics to include and what to not include. So, al-mas'a al-jabira. Al-jabira is the cast or anything, any bandage, large bandage, small bandage placed on a wound in any place of the body. Now, we're going to read from Kitab Al-Fiqh Al-Maliki wa Adillatuhu by Al-Habib ibn Tahir, which we mentioned, was it last time, where I talked about the different texts and I showed you the graph? I think it was last time. So this is a modern work which is based on Al-Sharh Al-Saghir by Al-Imam Dardir. Like, first of all, if anyone has questions about Tayammum before we get into this new topic, now would be the time. But also, if you have a question later on, that's not a problem. I'll just give 10 seconds. If no one has a question, we'll begin reading. Later. There are 3 main categories of people in which the rulings about al-masah differs. The first person is someone who, if he removes the jabira, the cast, the bandage, etc., anything that is similar to it, if he removes it and wipes over it, there's a strong fear, even if it's not confirmed, if it's blunt, if it's just most likely scenario, that he's going to either die or there's going to be serious repercussions to removing it. Serious repercussions in this scenario, things just like having to have the arm amputated. For example, if you have, I don't know, some kind of bullet wound, and it's a serious injury, you can't infect it. If it gets infected, you might have to remove the entire arm. If you're going to lose one of your senses, for example, if you're going to be paralyzed in a limb or another, if you're going to, and most of these apply to arm and feet. There's very rarely, these types of injuries on the face. I've never seen someone with a cast on their face except in extremely, extremely bad, scenarios. So this is the first scenario. If there's fear of death or serious repercussions. In this case, it is obligatory upon him to wipe over the cast or the jabira, and it is sinful for him to remove it because putting oneself in harm's way is sinful. The second category is someone who is not going to have that serious of a repercussion. He's not going to die. He's not going to lose a limb or lose an important bodily function. However, he could become sick, number one. If he is already sick, he could increase in sickness, or the sickness could take longer to heal. So either you're not sick, but you could become sick if you remove it. If you are sick, you can either take longer to recover, or the sickness could increase. If one of these 3 apply to you, then it is permissible. So the first scenario, if you could die, then it's obligatory. It's not a rukhsa, it's a azima. It's the original ruling. In that case, the original ruling is that it's obligatory upon you, because that's it's obligatory to save yourself. If it's just the second category mentioned, which is just increase of sickness, then it becomes a rukhsa. It becomes a it's a ticket out. It's an easy way out that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted us to not make ibadah too hard on us. طيب. It's jaiz in this case. It's permissible. So you're not punished for doing it, not punished for not doing it. You're not rewarded for doing it, not rewarded for not doing it. The third category is if it's really hard on you, meaning it's a pain. You're gonna have to remove the cast and then you have to put it back on, and you might have to go to the doctor so he does it properly again. But nothing bad is gonna happen to you. This third category, it's impermissible. It's impermissible, and it does not fulfill the condition of tahara if you wipe over it. Those are the three main categories. طيب. What do you do if we said in the first two you can wipe over it. What do you do if it's going to be damaged even if you wipe over it? A lot of these casts, these bandages, these things are they're not waterproof. They could be damaged simply by this water being wiped over them. If that's the case, then you wipe over the wrapping. And if even the wrapping is not enough, then you wipe over another wrapping, and so on and so forth until you can do it properly. And I think most modern casts that I've seen, my brother broke his arm 2 times, so he had this thick plastic mesh. It was blue, and it was above the cast, and it was basically to protect it from water. It was waterproof. I'm sure it has an additional function, which is keeping it in shape, but it was waterproof. So in that scenario, you could wipe over it. In lesser scenarios, when there isn't this protective cover, then you would have to place a protective cover and wipe over that protective cover. Wait, what do you do if this cast is half of the part of wudu? Meaning, it covers half of your arm or half of your head. In that scenario, you would wipe or wash the half that is not covered, and then you would do masah over the jabira that is covered. So this is an exception in which we are allowed to do tajzi of the a'dha al-wudu. We're allowed to divide the parts of wudu into parts if the cast is covering half of it. Similarly, we mentioned earlier in wudu that the Hanbali madhab has an exception to other madhab in that it allows you to wipe over the imama, the turban, with its conditions, obviously. The Maliki madhab allows you also to wipe over the imama in this case, in the case that it is protecting a sickness, protecting, a burn or something of that nature, just protecting the skin. This is a method that they would have used longer than, they wouldn't use this anymore. You wouldn't go to a doctor nowadays and he would tell you to cover your head with a hat or a imama. But, people back in the day, they would see this as valid due to the different conditions they were in. Similarly, some people today might find this to be necessary even, such as the people in Gaza right now. Most of them do not have access to doctors. And a lot of people, they would go to the hospital. They're not dying. Obviously, there are people dying in the hospital, but some of them who have lesser wounds or injuries due to the war, such as, for example, they have their entire, like half of their scalp removed. It was skimmed off by a rock or by whatever it was. If they go to the hospital, because of how crowded the system is, they would tell them, we can't really do anything for you. Because they're just focusing on the absolutely crucial patients, and you wouldn't be one in that case. So they tell you just, cover something. So even though we're in the modern day, sometimes these situations can happen where we're sent back to the Stone Age, basically. And that's why it's important. A lot of people ask why we're learning these not these specifically, but general, a lot of ahkam seem very ancient. We don't do them anymore. A lot of people ask why are we learning them? It's because society is extremely fragile. At any time, we could be sent back to a situation in which we need to use these ancient methods of medicine and of tahara and etc. Similarly, a lot of people, like for example, another situation that's similar is the ahkam of cleaning oneself after using the bathroom, which is something again not covered deeply in this text. We're going to get to it in later texts. So cleaning oneself, there's usually two ways: istinja, using water, or istijmar, using a solid object, such as back in the day they would have used small pebbles or rocks or leaves. And they have very specific ahkam about what you're allowed to use and what you're not allowed to use for istijmar. Again, a lot of people ask, why are we learning this? We have, we have toilets and we have shattafas. Why are we still learning this stuff? We're never going to use it. There are places in the world that still use this. A lot of people, specifically from the Maliki madhab, who go to study advanced studies in Mauritania, Shinqit. They go to these mahdaras. If you don't know what a mahdara is, it's these, centers of learning in the middle of the desert. They have no access to electricity or water. And this is what they have to do. They just came from, I don't know, New York City or Los Angeles. All of a sudden, they have to do istijmar, the ancient way. So this is why we learn these ahkam that seem outdated, because at any time, if we're sent back to a situation where we need to use them, at that time, we might not have the luxury of being able to start learning these ahkam at that time. So we need to have them in the back of our head. We need to know all these situations that could possibly occur. And most of all, the mufti needs to know. That's why it's a farq kifaya. It's a communal obligation for at least one mufti to be present in every community. Because imagine a community gets sent to these situations and they have nobody amongst them who knows these ahkam. What are they going to do? But inshallah, we all remain in. First of all, inshallah, we all learn these ahkam properly and deeply, so that we're not, first of all, in need of people to know our ahkam, whatever situation that may arise. And second of all, may Allah keep us from situations like these in which we need to use these ancient methods anyway. Like, وَمَنْ صَلَّى الْعِشَاءَ بِتَيَمُّمٍ. Yes, we finished the tayammum. We mentioned most of the rulings of al-mas'ala jabira, wiping over the bandages and the cast. So there are two questions. So can that cover be a cloth? The cover can be anything as long as it's tahir. Now a cloth. Now you as a person need to look at what's relevant to you. If you need to protect the cast that's underneath from water, you need to do whatever you need to do to make sure that the water doesn't reach. If you think a cloth is going to do, then a cloth will do. If you think, no, you need something more waterproof, such as plastic or latex or some modern material, you be the judge of what you need to do to protect the cast. But from a legal perspective, anything that is tahir, it's going to fulfill the obligation. Like, which category would be applied to wound dressings like gaze? In the case of one who had a penetrating injury and fears that he would bleed if he wipes over it with water. If you're talking about bleeding in the sense that it's a possibility he could, continue bleeding for a long time and it would prolong that injury. Prolonging the injury would put him in the second category, which is permissible. Now, if it's to the extent that he could bleed to death, again, you have to really be, you have to imagine what kind of injury this is. If it's something that could lead him to bleed to death, then that would be the first category, in which it's obligatory for him to not remove it. The scholars say the mufti is the prisoner of the mustafti. The mufti is the prisoner of the person who's asking him for fatwa. And the reason is because he's going to rely upon how detailed the person asking is. If someone just says, I have an injury, he's not going to know what he's going to ask more questions. What type of injury is this? How big is it? To what extent has it already harmed you? To what extent is there a fear of it turning into something worse? And that's also why it's necessary for a mufti to be aware of ahkam al-adiyya, not just shar'i ahkam, but also ahkam al-adiyya, regular ahkam, regular rulings, which means, things like medicine, things like just basic construction or engineering or economics. Muftis need to know all these things so that they can understand where the mustafti is coming from. And if they don't understand them, they're going to need to ask an expert. When you get to the chapters of, for example, commerce and zakah, you're going to find a lot of specific rulings which tell you that you need to go ask Ahl al-Ma'rifah, the people of knowledge. Who's he telling? He's telling the ulama, the shuyukh of Sharia, go ask the people of knowledge. Meaning, go ask the people who know about these rulings. Go ask the people who know about the pricings of specific items, the method of creation of specific items. So, at the end of the day, muftis don't work on their own. In cases like this, they would need to work with a doctor to understand what's happening. They would need a doctor's note, as modern people would say. Like, any more questions before we wrap up for today? Wrap up. What do you mean? No? Wait. The question from last time, or that happened after last time in the chat regarding marble, al-rukham, because it's considered from the Sa'id. So someone mentioned that a lot of marble nowadays, it's sealed with these, waterproof materials. And so I asked Mufti Abdul Hamid al-Mubarak about this, explained to him, XYZ, and he hasn't responded yet. He hasn't provided an answer yet. So when he does provide an answer, I will relay that answer to you guys. As for me, I am not sure about the issue. And the reason is because it's specifically mentioned in the ahkam that you can do tayammum from marble in buildings and like pillars of mosques. The thing is, I would think they were also polished and waxed back in the day, so I'm not sure if there's something different. Like, someone asks, can I ask a question completely unrelated? Let's leave it for after class. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين.